this man is over 40. If I look like that when I'm 40, maybe getting asked as a kid, do your eyes see the same thing that ours do, was worth it after all. Hey, it's Nicole, you don't care that much, let's move on. Today we're talking Squid Game, a Netflix phenomenon for 1, rapidly becoming the most watched show on the platform, and 2, making people on TikTok believe that every Asian person was on this show. What's really impressive is this South Korean show has topped Netflix streaming rankings in all countries, despite not having, at least in the US, a lot of press or marketing before debut. Squid Game's premise is hundreds of indebted people compete in children's games with deadly stakes. The show stands on its own, but it's drawn a lot of comparisons to this really unknown film called Parasite, a 2019 South Korean film that's also a bleak take on income inequality. Squid Game is also part of the Battle Royale, aka death game genre, and that's basically where everyone starts killing each other until it's last man standing. If you don't know what I mean, think Hunger Games or Battle Royale. Little note here, Squid Game has been criticized for similarities with As the Gods Will, this 2014 Japanese film where high schoolers are forced to play in deadly children's games. In response, Squid Game's director has said that only the first death game is similar, and also he'd been trying to get Squid Game produced since a decade ago. Squid Game is clearly a hit for other reasons. In my opinion, because of the childhood/video game aesthetics that reflect Squid Game's cohesive theme, the characters, the attention to detail, and the cultural context and timing. We'll get to it all. Easter eggs, theories, my personal opinion on the controversial finale. But let's first do an overview of Season 1. The prologue sequence, thankfully, explains the name Squid Game, which is a children's game where Team Offense tries to tap a specific space on the court, while Team Defense tries to shove that team out of bounds. This scene in slow-mo allows us to zero in on the expressions of these children: the innocence, competitive determination, and violence. Innocence and violence, especially, are constantly juxtaposed throughout the season. Fast forward, we meet our protagonist Gi-hun, a deadbeat and divorced father who is mooching off his elderly mother. He's lazy and kind of horrible, but his redeeming quality is that he clearly loves his daughter, even though he's constantly disappointing her. He steals from his mother to bet on horses and miraculously wins big. Those of you who've watched this show, this number should look really familiar to you. But before he can buy his daughter a proper birthday present, he's pickpocketed and then encounters loan sharks. Later that day at the subway station, Gi-hun meets this dapper gentleman who invites him to play a children's game. Side note, this man is over 40. If I look like that when I'm 40, maybe getting asked as a kid, do your eyes see the same thing that ours do, was worth it after all. Each round that Gi-hun wins, he'll get 10,000 won. Each round he loses, he gets slapped in the face. Once he finally wins, Gi-hun receives the money and an invitation to join a game that could potentially solve all his financial woes. So he calls. The 456 participants wake up in an undisclosed location. It's our first look at the main characters such as Sebyok, the earlier pickpocket and North Korean escapee, Ali, a simple Pakistani man, and Il-nam, an old man with a tumor. Pink-suited workers explain that you need to win 6 games in order to collect a huge cash prize. Right before Game 1, Gi-hun meets his childhood friend Sang-woo, who attended a prestigious university and was supposedly the one who got out. Game 1 is red light, green light, where you must cross the finish line without getting caught moving by the doll when it turns around. Players soon find that when you get caught, you get shot. People panic, and by the end, nearly half the players are eliminated. One of the rules of the contract is that a majority vote can get them out of the game, and surprisingly this happens by 1 vote and everyone is let go. Problem is, they realize that they have no fighting chance even in the outside world, and most of them elect to return and gamble with their lives. A couple more games go by. Players form alliances and start realizing that they can murder each other to increase their share of the prize. One of the especially traumatic games is one of marbles, where the players partner up and then realize that only one of them can live. It poses the question of morality and what we owe other people when our own survival is questioned. Soon, some wealthy VIPs come to watch the final 2 games in person, betting on the competitors just like Gi-hun earlier had bet on horses. In a very tense 5th game where players have to choose between normal and tempered glass steps, only 3 make it out alive. It's been mentioned in one of those How to Beat Squid Game videos that these players should have taken their shoes and thrown them on the glass to check them. That's smart. I mean, personally, I think that the game host would have just shot them for cheating.
Well, that's no fun.
But I remind myself that it doesn't really matter what I think. I respect people who try to figure out how to survive in death games because I know myself very well and I count on myself to immediately perish. The glass shatters after the timer ends and one shard seriously wounds Se-byuk. The three are left in the room with steak knives. Gi-hun sticks with Se-byuk, who he's grown to care for, and when he tries to get help, Sang-woo comes and kills her. Smart move on his part. Sang-woo is clearly the best player there because they either would have teamed up against him or voted to end the game, leaving him with nothing. The men fight in Game 6, obviously Squid Game, and Gi-hun, right as he's about to win, decides to end the game to try to spare Sang-woo. Unfortunately, Sang-woo kills himself, another smart move on his part because at least this way he can ensure that Gi-hun will use some of the money to take care of his mother, as opposed to them both leaving with nothing. Gi-hun is sent back to his life with the money, but returns to find his mother dead. Gi-hun spends the next year refusing to touch any of the money. It struck me as odd that for an entire year he abandoned Se-byuk's brother in the orphanage, and I don't remember if he knew about the mother, but if he did, that's worse. He didn't care for Sang-woo's mother and presumably abandoned his daughter as well, all of which would have been really important for this character. Yes, he's got PTSD and probably considers it blood money, but those were the dying wishes of his friends. Also, the trigger for him to finally start using that money, him assuming that the game is over, didn't really make that much sense to me. Basically, Gi-hun finds out that the old man, Il-nam, is the creator. He was so rich that he got bored and didn't know what to do with his life. Il-nam thinks that he gave participants a fighting chance, that everyone participated of their own free will, and he was determined to reveal the depravity of human nature. After this grand reveal, Il-nam dies probably of his tumor. Gi-hun assumes the games are over and starts spending the money to help Sang-woo's mother and Se-byuk's brother. He plans to visit his daughter in the US, but on the way he sees that beginning man again, swipes the card, and calls the number, presumably disappointing his daughter yet again. Thus ends Season 1. I didn't even get into the sizable subplot of the police officer, but of course the plot alone is not why the show got so popular. Squid Game asks a lot of big questions and works its themes into everything. It's not subtle, nor was it intended to be. I have deduced that this is a show about capitalism, thanks to my unmatched logical prowess and also the director outright saying that this is a show about capitalism. Well, really, he said that Squid Game is an allegory or fable about modern capitalist society, something that depicts an extreme competition, somewhat like the extreme competition of life. Whatever your stance on capitalism, you see there are winners and losers, and the system can be quite predatory, or at least facilitate predatory behavior. The main characters each represent some of the most marginalized groups in South Korea: the North Korean defector, the foreigner, the ex-factory worker, and the old sick man. Gi-hun has tried to, as they say, pull himself up by the bootstraps with his ex-factory job and small business, but he still ended up a loser. There's an illusion of agency throughout the season. For instance, is it really your choice if your only two options are unsurvivable? And even in the individual games, for example, when the glassmaker starts showing that he can tell apart the glass, the game host modifies the game by turning off the lights. There are plenty of moral dilemmas too. Ordinary people choose to lie, cheat, steal, and kill other people in order to survive. Is this justifiable to overcome financial desperation? Are we, as a random Washington Post comment asks, destined to cannibalize each other as resources get scarcer and scarcer? Amid these bleak questions, however, this is still a story of hope. Characters like Gi-hun hold on to their humanity and their hope through their compassion to others, even to the very end. The Atlantic quote that no one who survives does so on their own, but because of the sacrifices of others, does refer to predatory capitalism, but also more positively to relationships. The tug-of-war teamwork is an example, as are the ways contestants help each other out. Again, the messages aren't subtle, but they do match the visual aesthetic, and I am so excited to talk about this. The world outside Squid Game is comparatively bleak and dark, and inside is this surreal, supposedly escapist world with lurid colors, exaggerated shapes, and large-scale sets. The first game, a painted illusion of an open field, highlights the illusion of choice between these worlds. The playground setting underscores the dissonance between these innocent, childish elements and the graphic violence and gore. Squid Game's director wanted to explore human nature and how we change from childhood to adulthood by having adults revisit children's games. These nostalgia-inducing games are twisted, dialing up the underlying brutality when the stakes are life and death. It actually reminds me of the Among Us craze. That game mixed hide and seek with werewolf/mafia and featured adorable little characters that were disturbingly violent in trying to find the killer among us. I only played Among Us a couple times though because I already am not good enough to have as much imposter syndrome as I do. All these nightmarish childhood elements, from this robot modeled after a girl in children's textbooks to this giant piggy bank that collects cash, degrade the players, reverting them to their base instincts. Their numbered green tracksuits obviously dehumanize them. It's a beautiful contrast to the workers' pink uniforms, especially when the first episode is called Red Light, Green Light for the game. The childhood theme also lends itself to simple, universal experiences that help Squid Game's widespread appeal. The games are easily understood and relatable. There's the despair of being left out when people are picking teammates. But despite it all, you can read from the children's theme a glimmer of hope as the characters try to preserve their innocence and humanity. There's also a clear video game aesthetic. The set, for example, looks pixelated. The Squid Game logo reminds me of PlayStation symbols. And here's an arcade scoreboard with cash dropping every time the players advance around. There's a behind-the-scenes video that shows even the actors thinking that the set was nothing like they imagined. The Squid Game crew made the set as realistic as possible when filming in order to capture the actors' raw emotions, like fear when they were trying to cross the glass bridge.
시각보다 그게 1.5m 높이만 올라가도 좀 무섭거든요. 그 유리가 주는 또 불안감이 있어서 실제 그 높은 다리에서 점프하는 것 같은 느낌을 가짜로 하는 게 아니라 진짜 그들이 느끼는 공포감이 몸에 표현이 돼서 실제가 주는 효과가 저희 세트에 있었다고 생각을 합니다.
Speaking of actors, let's talk one of Squid Game's greatest strengths, the emotion. Because yes, while survival games aren't anything new, Squid Game stands out because it doesn't glamorize action or violence, but rather focuses on the fleshed out characters and their motivations. Each of the main characters has a compelling reason for their desperation and choice to participate. It dispels the idea that your situation is your own doing and you can always find a way out. Anyone can fall into debt through bad luck, and there are people who rely on you to stay put. A lot of the games are based on luck and you don't have much control. The players don't have agency anywhere. Hoyeon in particular is by no means a perfect character, but he is an increasingly likable one, and that is what matters. He keeps disappointing his loved ones, but clearly means well. He holds on to his compassion through repeated trauma. Sang-woo, his childhood friend, was supposedly the one who got out. You could say he only ended up there due to personal greed, but I think it's also an example of how even the golden child inevitably got roped back into where he came from. Se-byuk, who escaped from North Korea and is trying to reunite with her mother and brother, is an icy character that we get to see learn to trust other people. These actors were incredibly expressive in significant emotional scenes, and from the very first episode, I knew the show would destroy me. Ali's expression when he realizes he's been betrayed, only pain. The VIP spectators, aka the ones who bet on the players, are cliche as hell. On purpose, I'm sure, but it could have been done better. Like, yes, I understand making them completely unlikable and inhumane, but the dialogue is terrible, and there's this bit where they just keep harping on 69.
I put a lot of money on that dickhead to win.
What convinced you to bet so much on number 69?
Such a beautiful number, 69.
Oh, you dirty dog.
96.
What's your reason?
Well, if I can't do 69, I'll try 96.
Let me know why you think they're in animal masks. My guess is it's either a play on hunting, where animals are hunting and stalking humans, or it's to show how far from human these people really are. Or it's to show excess, or their furries light. One of them says,
The contest in Korea was the best.
implying that there are games like this all around the world. Which makes me wonder, are all these VIPs American/European, or only the annoying ones? And what if in the other more boring parts they just didn't get the memo for children's games and just have their people playing Jeopardy or something?
Of this, signaling adulthood, is presumed to be 14 in boys and 12 in girls. Tom?
What is the age of consent?
No.
Anyway, one thing I love about films and shows is their attention to detail. When I finish watching and can't stop thinking about it and head straight to Reddit for analyses, Squid Game has a lot of layers, like an onion. It foreshadows a lot, so it's worth watching twice. Major deaths, for example, are previewed. The gangster jumps off a bridge, he falls off a bridge. Sang-woo tries to off himself, he succeeds in the end. Ali steals cash from his boss, his marbles are stolen from him. Se-byuk threatens a man with a knife to his neck. She's killed by one. Also, peep the scar she had from the very beginning. Gi-hun doesn't die, but at one point he swears on his mother's life and he returns to find her dead. Gi-hun earns 4.56 million won from his horse bet. He's player 456, and thus the prize pool is 45.6 billion won. The art on the walls in the beginning depicts each game, and even Gi-hun's present to his daughter, this gun-shaped lighter in a gift box, foreshadows the way bodies are disposed of in the game. The Squid Game logo is apparently the initials of Squid Game in the letters of the Korean alphabet written in Hangul. The circle is O, triangle is part of J, and square is the M. Also, apparently this is a real phone number that has been called a lot of times. There's even a theory floating around that in the beginning, if Gi-hun had picked the red instead of blue tile, he would have been assigned to become a worker. If so, red versus blue is another illusion of choice because it isn't random as you would expect, and you get sent into the system regardless. People support this theory because in all the footage we've seen of players being invited to Squid Game, no one is shown picking a red tile. This is definitely plausible, but I kind of wonder why then did they not make that tile green? Would it be too obvious? It doesn't seem like that game is traditionally red and blue, though could be wrong. And also, isn't that a vastly unequal outcome? Of course, this might be addressed in season 2. I'm not Korean, to the, I'm sure, relief of Koreans everywhere, so I did have to watch this show with subtitles, and I heard that a lot gets lost in translation. Ilnam says to Gi-hun that out here the torture is worse, referring to the world outside Squid Game. The actual translation is more like, this place is more of a hell. Hell, unlike torture, goes on forever, and these players have decided that they would rather gamble their lives rather than resign to the eternal humiliation and debasement of being poor. In another example from this TikTok user, this character says, "I'm not a genius, but I can work it out." What she actually says is, "I'm very smart, I just never got the chance to study." This is an omitted detail about the lack of upward mobility. This TikTok user also mentions the old man telling Gi-hun that we share everything, as opposed to there is no ownership between me and you, which is ironic and also goes back to, what we owe other people. Finally, the last bit of translation content I find kind of funny. It's just the meteoric rise in people searching 45.6 billion won to USD. Overall, I enjoyed binging Squid Game, but the finale, mainly because of Gi-hun's actions as discussed, fell flat for me. The major twists at the end you can kind of see coming. I, however, am not that observant, so I thought that the old man was the creator from the very beginning, but then second-guessed that hunch. And I didn't love that explanation of rich old men having problems feeling alive as the whole justification for the games.
자네, 돈이 하나도 없는 사람과 돈이 너무 많은 사람의 공통점이 뭔 줄 아나? 하면은 좀 재미가 있을까?
Like, I don't know, man, read a book. I also wasn't sure how I felt about the police officer subplot. Like, I'm sure he's alive and this is just a setup for season 2. That's what the whole finale felt like, a setup. So, my beginning question of why Squid Game is so popular has multiple answers, many of which I have already touched on. I think I'll close, though, on a couple aspects of cultural context. Of course, Squid Game has many intriguing elements, such as its sadistic premise, extreme stakes, shock value, cliffhangers, mystery, puzzles, and to the point where organ trading is a subplot. Maybe the whole death game genre, too, is a little newer to Western audiences than Asian ones, but it's definitely more that Squid Game comes at a time where film and TV exploring the darker side of capitalism, while by no means a new problem, are increasingly popular. Think The Platform or Parasite. Another layer of cultural context is Hallyu, aka the Korean wave, or the growing popularity of South Korean cultural exports like K-pop or K-beauty, K-dramas, etc. I have made a separate video discussing Hallyu, though it's more in the context of why K-pop is popular. After the success of Parasite 2, I'm sure people were keeping an eye out for the next big thing. And there's certainly similarities, helped along by Jung Jae-il, who composed the soundtracks for both Parasite and Squid Game. The score of uplifting classical music contributes to the overall dissonance and feelings of unease. Squid Game could also be riding on our cultural obsession with gaming. It could also be that Netflix just doesn't have anything else as innovative. Admittedly, my perspective is kind of skewed based on some of the content I've made myself watch recently, which is part of the reason why I have started dreading making media commentary videos. But Squid Game has brought me back from the dead. Alright, thanks for watching, and if you got anything out of this video, please watch another, subscribe, and fight me in the comments so I can make more out of spite. If you made it to this point, you clearly have thoughts, so let me know. Okay, see y'all.